At exactly 23:14 hours on May 11th, 2026, the moonless dark over the Strait of Hormuz was sliced open by the impact of a single unidentified projectile that struck the Liberian-flagged general cargo vessel Astoria Star, 23 nautical miles north of Doha. The 19,000-ton freighter, carrying machine parts and steel pipe to Karachi, was steaming on a course the IRGC Navy had been tracking for 6 hours from a coastal observation post on Keshem Island. The strike was not random. The strike was the opening signal of an operation Tehran had codenamed Inkar al-Tahrim, denial of embargo, and the Astoria Star was the bait. Captain Niall Brennan on the bridge had 4 seconds of confusion before the bridge windows went dark with smoke and his vessel began a 14-degree starboard list. The Mayday went out on Channel 16. The world heard it. And in the IRGC Navy Operations Center beneath the cliffs of Bandar Abbas, the watch officer started the timer 47 minutes. If everything fell into place, Iran would have a British Royal Navy boarding team in custody, the ceasefire would be irrelevant by sunrise, and Tehran would have the leverage Trump had refused them at the negotiating table. The British response was inevitable, and Tehran had counted on it. HMS Dragon D-35, a Type 45 destroyer recently deployed by Downing Street specifically to protect Gulf shipping, was the closest NATO asset 38 nautical miles north-northwest on patrol since 4. Her captain, Commander Edward Holloway, received the Mayday at 23 hours, 15 minutes, and 33 seconds. Standard procedure was unambiguous: vector to the casualty, render assistance, secure the vessel. Holloway brought Dragon to flank speed, 29 knots, and dispatched her embarked Wildcat HMA 2 helicopter with a 6-man Royal Navy boarding team, 3 Royal Marines from 47 Commando Raiding Group, 3 sailors trained in casualty extraction. The Wildcat lifted off at 23:21. It carried Lieutenant James Cartwright, the boarding officer. It also carried, in the Royal Marines tactical kit, an emergency satellite beacon that would prove to be the single most important piece of equipment in the Persian Gulf that night. But the Astoria Star was not alone in the water. At 23:09, 6 minutes before the strike, 3 IRGC Sepah-class fast attack craft had slipped from the cover of a commercial tanker anchorage south of Larak Island. Each carried a crew of 9, 2 heavy machine guns, and most importantly, an IRGC Navy guest detachment of 4 operators each, equipped with EU standard maritime boarding kit identical to the Royal Marines' own gear. They were vectored to converge on the Astoria Star from the south, hidden inside the radar shadow of the freighter's hull. By the time the Wildcat helicopter cleared Dragon's flight deck, the 3 Sepah craft were already 800 meters from the Astoria Star, AIS off, lights extinguished. The IRGC Navy Operations Center watch officer keyed his microphone. Inkar al-Tahrim, Phase 2, engage. The trap was now closed. What would you do if you were Commander Holloway in this moment? Your boarding team in the air, a damaged civilian vessel under your protection, 3 unidentified surface contacts emerging from the radar shadow, the ceasefire technically still in effect, and the entire diplomatic weight of the Iran negotiations hanging on whether you escalate or hold fire? Comment below. The Wildcat fast-roped Cartwright's team onto the Astoria Star's aft deck at 23:31. Brennan met them on the bridge wing with a head wound and a story that did not match the radar plot Holloway was watching from Dragon. The projectile, Brennan said, had come from the north from open water. But Dragon's Samson radar showed 3 small surface contacts approaching from the south at 38 knots, lights out, and the satellite imagery feed from RAF Akrotiri showed the same 3 contacts had been parked in the Larak anchorage at sunset. They were not fishermen Cartwright keyed his suit radio. Dragon actual, this is boarding 1. Vessel master account inconsistent with situational picture. I assess hostile intent. Request air support. Request. The transmission was cut by a 110 decibel acoustic disruption. The IRGC's coastal LRAD station on Keshem Island had just initiated audio jamming on the 243 megahertz's International Maritime Distress Band. 11 seconds later, the 3 Sepah craft swung alongside the Astoria Star's flooded starboard side. 12 IRGC operators boarded simultaneously through 3 different hatches, weapons drawn. Cartwright's team had time for one defensive movement. Lance Corporal Riley Donaldson placed his SA-80 into low-ready position before the IRGC fire team leader screamed in fluent English, "British Royal Marines, stand down. You are guests of the Islamic Republic of Iran. Lay down your weapons." Cartwright made the call no British boarding officer had been forced to make since the Falklands. He weighed 6 versus 12, weighed the Royal Marines' rules of engagement, weighed the diplomatic catastrophe of a firefight on a neutral flagged vessel during an active ceasefire, and he ordered his men to stand down. The Royal Navy boarding team was now in IRGC custody. The clock on the British government's worst Persian Gulf hostage crisis since 2007 had just started, but Tehran had miscalculated one variable. At 23:34, Cartwright's emergency beacon, a satellite direct PRC, 117G with a hidden distress mode keyed to the Royal Marines tactical kit, transmitted a 0.4-second burst to a UK MILSATCOM node, which relayed it to GCHQ Cheltenham, which forwarded it to the U.S. National Security Agency liaison officer at RAF Menwith Hill, which pushed it to USEND Dopacom in 1.1 seconds, which was already cross-feeding the Astoria Star situation to U.S. CENTCOM in Tampa. Within 11 seconds, the U.S. Navy 5th Fleet Maritime Operations Center in Manama had positive identification of 3 IRGC Sepah-class hulls in physical contact with a British Royal Navy boarding team on a Liberian-flagged neutral vessel. Vice Admiral Brad Hammer Whitman, commanding 5th Fleet, did not wait for political authorization. The mutual defense agreements with the UK pre-authorized maritime rescue. At 23:36, USS Dwight D. Eisenhower, CVN 69, holding station 140 nautical miles east of Bahrain, launched 2 A-18F Super Hornets from VFA, 3 swordsmen carrying AGM, 8 Harpoon anti-ship missiles, 2 F-35Cs from VFA, 9 Mighty Shrikes carrying joint standoff weapons, and 1 EA-18G Growler with full NGJ MB jamming pods. Time to weapons release on the IRGC Sepah craft, 9 minutes. And then Whitman did something subtler and more decisive than the airstrike. At 23:38, he ordered the destroyer USS Mason DDG-87, already shadowing the Astoria Star at 12 nautical miles, to light up her spy 1D radar at full power on the IRGC coastal stations along Bandar Abbas, then transmit on the IRGC's own command frequency open, in clear text and Farsi, a single message: IRGC Navy, U.S. 5th Fleet, we see the boarding, we see the Sepah hulls, we see Bandar Abbas operations. Release the British team in 20 minutes or your 3 Sepah hulls cease to exist and your coastal command bunker becomes a parking lot. Acknowledge. The message hit every IRGC operations center from Bushehr to Jask in clear text. Every Iranian sailor heard it. Every Iranian officer heard it. The IRGC's tactical communications discipline was now publicly broken on its own frequency. The political humiliation was instantaneous. Tehran ran the calculation in 14 minutes. The British boarding team was a strategic asset only if Iran could survive the consequences of holding them. With two F-35Cs 9 minutes out, a U.S. destroyer's radar painting Bandar Abbas, and the IRGC's own command frequency now compromised, the survival math collapsed. At 23:54, the Sepah fire team leader received a single-coded transmission from the IRGC Navy Operations Center. He turned to Cartwright. He said, in English, "There has been a misunderstanding. You are free to return to your vessel." The 6 Royal Marines walked off the Astoria Star at 23:58. The Wildcat collected them and was back aboard HMS Dragon by 0:14. The 3 Sepah craft withdrew to the Larak anchorage by 0:31. No shot was fired, no casualty was reported. Tehran's official statement at 2 local time described a routine maritime safety verification conducted in cooperation with Royal Navy partners. The internet did the rest, but the damage was done. By dawn, 3 things were true that had not been true at sunset. First, Britain was now operationally inside the Iran war, and Downing Street's freedom of action in the negotiations was gone. Whitehall could not unilaterally walk back from a confrontation in which 6 Royal Marines had just been held at gunpoint by an IRGC fire team. Second, the IRGC's tactical communications discipline had been publicly broken on its own frequency in the worst political humiliation of the war so far, and 3 IRGC general officers would be quietly relieved of duty within 72 hours. Third, and most importantly, the entire world had just watched the U.S. Fifth Fleet rescue a British boarding team in 47 minutes flat without firing a shot, using nothing but radar, satellite intelligence, and a single message in clear Farsi. Brent crude opened at $107 a barrel. The Strait of Hormuz remained closed to civilian traffic. The ceasefire was, in Trump's words, on massive life support, but it was still technically alive. The next confrontation will come within 7 days. Tehran cannot afford another humiliation of this scale, and Washington cannot afford to extend the ceasefire again without something to show for it. Somewhere in a hardened bunker beneath the Alborz Mountains, IRGC commanders are studying the 47 minutes of May 11 and writing the playbook for May 18. The Gulf is quiet again. It is not calm. It has never been calm. If you believe Britain will now formally enter the war as a co-belligerent war, if you believe Tehran retreats and accepts the U.S. ceasefire terms by May 15, deal, subscribe, because the Middle East just shifted in 47 minutes, and the next 47 will define whether the world enters the summer at war or at peace.